Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review From. So, if the first two episodes were just kind of me, kind of in the shallow end of the pool, and I was kind of like, I don't know about this show. Like, I don't know. I think it just needs to get creative. All of a sudden, here comes episode 3 and 4. I'm like, and I'm in the deep end now, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just swimming around, just going like, this is some creative. Like, this is some creative stuff going on. Like, man, am I sold by this show within episodes 3 and 4 because I wasn't sure about this show. Now I'm much more sure. Now I'm much more like, okay, this is interesting. This is good enough. Yeah. Uh, yeah. That's what I feel about the show. Anyways, so with episodes 3 and 4, we find out that there's a real history of this town, and we get these kind of flashbacks. And Victor seems to be much more used in these episodes. Victor, the guy who, of course, was the peaches guy, like, hey, want some peaches? He's much more used in these episodes. And here's one thing that I have to like say here. I didn't really understand like where this show was at as far as like if like this show is just started up, because normally when I would assume a show would go on to Amazon, I would be like, oh, this first season is already done with. But I guess they're like still going on and putting episodes out there. I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand what's going on here. So there's technically 7 episodes available right now, so eventually there'll probably be more when I kind of start to like chomp through them. So I like that this show has a history and an origin, and we get a lot of that in these episodes. And we have, of course, people being able to choose their path. Like, so much of this show just feels like a video game to me. It's weird. But also, we're starting to find out that this town and a lot of people in it are freaking crazy. And I'm like, I want me some of that. Give me some of that crazy show, because then immediately I'm sold. Like, because we had little, like, snippets of something, and I was writing off Sarah as just a crazy person, and I was hoping that the whole town was crazy. But now I've like realized that, yeah, this whole town is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and that definitely is to give me a thumbs up within the show, because I'm like, there has to be something a lot more here, because like the first 2 episodes didn't like hit me with the hot stuff, so to speak. So I was just kind of like, yeah, I need really something here to really fascinate, intrigue me, and bam, right out of the gate within these episodes, I'm like, all right, okay, like we'll see how far the rabbit hole we go down within these episodes, because I'm interested. So let's talk about kind of like the vague sense of these episodes. So we have this punishment thing called the box within these episodes that that they're kind of dealing with, let's just say, and that the town concocts to punish somebody for a wrongdoing. And basically we realize how severe the box really is. I don't know if that was designed that way, but it is what it is. So we also like find out that certain characters were to have like certain prominent things to help out this town. Like, we find out that Boyd was, of course, the guy who created the whole talisman thing, or was to have figured that out somehow or another. And we possibly find out that the priest, who is Father Khatri, who is used much more prominently in these episodes, we find out that this guy is to have been here even before Boyd was. So, like, I'm like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And so we also find out at the beginning of episode 3 that when they end up saying that uh, that Donna has a community uh, like home, like, man, do we find out that like people are doing some community things in that place. And I'm just like, wow, okay. We just like stroll through at the middle of some night, and we're seeing some community. What does he mean? Check out the episodes. Uh, but yeah, so um, Victor is to be used prominently. We get to find out about the boy in white. So this isn't Gandalf, and like the kid is like, "You shall not pass." Like, no, the boy in white is to have this weird, bizarrish thing about him, which we're really trying to figure out and define. If this thing is kind of like a ghost or a figment of someone's imagination, that it seems that uh, this boy in white is to possibly be this thing to certain kids. Not quite sure. We'll define that possibly better somewhere down the road. But so Sarah is not the only crazy one in this show. Man, some stuff that goes on with Boyd in these episodes, I'm like very intrigued about, but also I'm just like, I'm really trying to understand and like this character a little bit more. So that's good. That's intriguing. And so definitely when you start to see somebody kind of have some arm twitching, there's a whole reasoning for that, and we'll find out by the end of episode 4. And so really interesting stuff, good things, fascinating. So these episodes feel like a video game, and the people who I guess were to have put this together were also the people of Lost. So I'm like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. To have seen like Lost for those episodes and then going into this show, I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So they kind of took a very horror like turn for this one. Instead of Lost, where it kind of has the weird black smoke thing. And so, yeah, like, so with that said, let's just go into this thing that is to be called spoilers. Let's just go on to that double 5 time territory. Let's just go into this thing called spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about the time I get to spoil these episodes. So, episode 3, Community. So all of a sudden, we have this community place where everybody is asleep. Not everybody. Somebody is bumping in the night. And I'm talking about 2 people that just decide to, like, yeah, let's go on and just start doing some... How can I put this nicely? Somebody's doing the horizontal mumbo within this chair. And while all of a sudden everybody else is trying to sleep... There's 2 people just going at it in this chair while like Tabitha and Jim are trying to sleep in like the other part of this house. So they're struggling to sleep, and so they're talking things out. And so cue the next day where everybody's all awake, and so Ethan is to eventually get his, like, I guess they're trying to make this kid to be, like, the one Tiny Tim from, like, Scrooge. Where they're giving him this, like, little crutch, and, like, they're having him, like, go about the little town, and I'm like, you're turning this kid into Tiny Tim. Don't do that. Because if something ever happens to this kid, I will be mortified. So nothing should happen to Ethan. Let's say that right now. Let's hope nothing happens to Ethan. Because I will be just like, no, he was a Tiny Tim in the show. Whatever. Anyways, pushing on. So Jim is to go on to their RV and is to try to get a number of things. Because Ethan is already complaining that the hand-me-down PJs that he was given are really starting to itch. So Jim goes to the RV and is collecting all the stuff. And Julie's kind of ticked off because she wanted to get her own things because she didn't like anybody touching her stuff. Which is kind of funny because eventually we're going to have Julie who people are touching her stuff because we find out that a community house also just means that people are just going to take your crap and just say like, oh yeah, we're sharing because you're sharing my pillow. I'm going to share your shirt. You for taking my item of which that I've bizarrely named for whatever goofy reason. But we'll get to that. So we have it where the guy who had both his wife and his daughter die, Frank, is in the jail. And come to find out, Jim and Tabitha will possibly be going and taking Frank's house from him while one of the rooms is still not exactly clean. And we find out, I guess, the little girl's name was Megan. I wasn't really paying attention all that well. I guess there was a name plastered upon this door saying that this girl was Megan. I'm like, okay, sure. So Boyd is telling Frank that, hey man, I'm sorry, for what's going to happen. And so Frank is just like, okay, it's fine. And because Boyd is waking up and is looking outside his window at this thing called the box, realizing that at some point Boyd is going to have to put Frank in this box because that's going to be his punishment to watch on as all these monsters are to surround this box and to torture Frank. So we were led to just believe. We were thinking that this box thing was going to be sturdy enough that nothing was really going to happen to this guy, that he was just going to get tortured for the whole night and nothing else was going to happen. Man, were we wrong. Yikes. So we have Boyd and Father Cautry talking because Boyd is contemplating whether or not Frank should really go in this box. That is it really Frank's fault that his daughter and his wife are dead? Because possibly Boyd is thinking that maybe this is too far. Maybe this is too far of a punishment. And Father Cautry is just like, well, here's the thing. If you do not punish Frank, then what is that going to say for everybody else? That all of a sudden there is no punishment? That maybe people might not really need to learn their lesson? And so you have to kind of set an example for Frank by putting him in this box. So Boyd goes into the box himself and is just kind of frustrated by the fact that he may have to put someone in there. So This box kind of looks like durable, but we'll find out when Frank is really to go into it. So Boyd and Frank are kind of going around in town, kind of having one last kind of journey around. Frank is talking about him making the swing for Megan and like remembering what kind of bits in the past and whatever what have you. So we also have a moment where Father Cautry is taking the Matthews to go on and see this new home that they're going to live in, which of course was Megan's. And so they're going to go on and showcase them like, hey, like this is what happens when you don't go on and follow the rules. Like someone's probably going to die. So the Matthews are immediately thinking it's like, well, we're just going to take this house because it makes the most sense. But we have Father Cautry that is kind of breaking down like what is going on within this town, like the whole thing about breaking down the box to them, and he goes on and tries to explain like kind of a little bit more of the town. So and telling them that they're gonna be able to have a choice to be able to choose whether they want to live in part of the town or in the community house, and they get to have that choice. There's a whole ceremony and all that jazz. So Jade was the guy, of course, who is tied to this bed, and they strapped him in, and so he wakes up the next day and he's like, what the heck is going on? He's yelling and screaming. Donna, all of a sudden, who is just kind of not quite awake yet, is running to this guy's bed. And so Jade is like, do you know who I am? Do you know what I could do to you people? And Donna's like, oh, you're one of those. Well, let me explain the whole song and dance to you, because you're new here. So Donna goes on and explains this story to Jade, and then they let him loose. And Jade is thinking that this is some kind of role-play town. That, like, this is some kind of game that's going on here. And we have, like, Jade who thinks that he's, if you guys remember the Ashton Kutcher show, like, we have Jade who's thinking that he's getting punked here. That he is, like, having this big, massive role-play town that he's a part of. And so he's going on and stealing bikes, and he's going on and tra-la-la-la-la, like, where's the clue? Like, what clue pack, what part of this town do I have to go on and find this clue? And everybody's just like, what is he talking about? What is he rambling on about? Because this guy is on Cloud Planet Bizarro, thinking that this is like, oh, my friend must have set this up because my friend is like really good at practical jokes. And so, yeah, like, I'm just going to go on and just treat this like this is a video game. And like, man, this is so much fun. And he's like stealing bikes from girls and going on and just biking away. So all of a sudden, Jade is to make it to this one like bomb shelter. And he walks in there and he opens this one door, and there's this one, I guess, monster crushed under this boulder, and that freaks Jade out and has him kind of fall over and drop. And when Jade is to walk back where this monster and boulder was, all of a sudden this thing is gone. It's disappeared. Anyways, so at one point we have Jade talking to Kenny, the deputy, and explaining what he saw here. And then the deputy is like, well, okay, I'm going to have to go on and explain, like, I'm going to have to show you something. So the deputy pushes Jade on because Jade is to still think that this isn't a real world and that there's no consequences, because we had the Matthew family go on and they pick where they want to go, and surprise, Julie is to choose the community house over living with her parents. So we go on here, and Tabitha is not wanting Julie to separate from this family, because you know how you get with a lot of families where it's like, oh no, like this girl isn't old enough to live on her own yet, but like, you know what, if she's still alive within the next week, just kind of continue to just let her go. It doesn't feel like the town has much of like a schooling or education system, so I guess really for any number of these people, like whatever education that they are to get is what they get. I guess any number of the people could go on and stay and like educate like certain people at their own homes, because what else do they have to do? But um, like I guess that's legitimately it. Like I guess we don't really also get like TV or internet or whatever. At one point in this episode, we get this like radio signal, and Jade is grabbing this radio station, this radio signal, and I guess wanting to try to desperately communicate with people. But we'll see how that goes in other episodes. So we also have Kenny's mother that is making her way back into the swing of things, like making all this food for all these people. Kenny is telling her, it's like, well, hey, like, if anything, like, you should go on and rest, and like Kenny's dad just died. Like, I'm sure they don't want to go back into the quick swing of things. But Kenny's mother is just kind of burying herself in work to just kind of not really mourn the loss of her husband. So she's feeding everybody. They're getting this like buffet set up, and I'm in the back of my mind, I'm like, how are they getting all this food? Uh, but again, Kenny is to mention how like cows and animals just come out of nowhere, so they don't understand that yet. Like it feels consistently that people are to realize that parts of this town are starting to adjust and shift and move, and so I guess that's how we consistently get people more and more coming to this town, because we like see this huge map of different parts of the United States where people have just been taken from and have found that tree and are starting to make their way into the from town. So anybody could be added into this town at any moment. So that also means they can kill anybody off at any moment in this show, because they'll just replace them with probably someone else at some point. Because in one of these episodes, we find out that Victor at one point was the only person in this town for a long stretch of time, but we'll get to that. So after the ceremony, and Jade is to try and interrupt this ceremony and just say like, oh my god, like you guys are so good actors, like I'm really sold on everything that's going on here, like bravo. And Boyd, who is just like not having freaking Jade's just outlandish attitude, where Jade goes into this diner and he's just like, man, like the food here is actually really good. It's not like the food that I would expect for a game like this. And the deputy is just like, are you kidding me? And so Boyd is to grab Jade when they're doing this rock and flower ceremony, and Boyd is forcing Jade to like pick a stone or pick a flower, because if you pick a stone, you'll live in town. If you pick a flower, you're going to go with the community people. So Jade picks the stone, and he's like, okay, great. And then the deputy is to show Jade his friend, and that his friend is dead. Showing him to his grave, showing him his head that is all scratched up. And then Jade is like, "Oh my god, like, so this is real." So Jade starts mourning over the loss of his friend, and the deputy is like, "Finally, like, this guy has been enough." Because Jade was going on in the diner, and he was just like picking off food because he's like, "Well, I'm hungry, and I don't care that there's a line because like I'm the star of this story, and so yeah, I'm gonna go on and get my own food." And we just have Kenny's mother who smacks this guy, and so it's like, okay. So we find out that Jade is going to live with Kenny and Kenny's mother, and I'm like, okay. Who of course is Tong Chen Lu, I believe. If I'm ill pronouncing that, I apologize. So we also find out that I guess maybe Chrissy and Kenny, like, they're holding hands, and so would we have to really assess that they're in a like relationship? Like, I don't think I got the clear 411 on that for previous episodes, but I guess maybe there was a relationship between them, unless that wasn't really defined in my brain for other episodes. But it seems that we're more defined now. So Frank makes his way to this ceremony also, and talks to everybody that my mind is made up, that I want to go into the box, and I want to see my family. So we have Boyd who's like, okay, like, let's put him in the box because that's what he wants. And Frank is telling Boyd to like bury him next to his kids. And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like really, that shouldn't come down to that. Because also Boyd is giving like Frank this talisman and telling him it's like, well, hey, like, there's a cabin over yonder, you can go and hang out there and live however you want. And Frank is just like, no. So at the tail end of this third episode, we have Frank go into the box, and he then dies because we have Frank that's in this box. The monstrous things are surrounding this box, and they immediately just crash through the wood pieces and attack Frank and kill him. And that's how the third episode is to technically end in my brain. Because in the fourth episode, we kind of focus on Ethan continually seeing this boy in white. And like the boy in white is just outside and he's like, hey, like, he's just this kid that just consistently wants to have fun for whatever reason, and it's very undefined. So Ethan, of course, is to get this crutch made by Ellis, and we had it where Boyd was telling Tabitha that if Julie's going to be in the community house, that Ellis will go on and take care of Julie at that spot, and we start to see that within episode 4 here. So when Julie is to wake up, we have Victor who's drawing a picture of her, and she wakes up kind of freaked. And so like Victor is talking about dreams and stuff like that. And then he walks off and is like, hey, I drew a picture of you. You can have it if you want. And then Victor just walks off. And Julie is just already freaked about this guy anyways. So all of a sudden we have a girl named Trudy that is to have owned Julie's pillow. To the point where this girl names this pillow. Has a name for it. Okay? So we find out that Trudy is to just go on and take one of Julie's shirts. Because she's like, yeah, I really like this shirt. It's great. And like considering this is a community, we share everything. And then all of a sudden Fatima is to tell Julie, it's like, yeah, we don't share everything. Judy thinks that we share everything, but we're gonna get even with her. So Fatima goes on and is to take something important to Trudy and have Julie wear it to get even with Trudy, because I guess there was some cross dresser that I guess was to be wearing all these really cool and interesting looking clothes, and Trudy I guess was to steal that from this guy at one point, and she was to take it and say like, oh, this is mine, this is what I'm wearing. So all of a sudden we have Julie who is seeing Tabitha, and Tabitha is wanting to figure out some way to talk to her daughter. And so Tabitha is just like, well, hey, like I have this sweater that's yours that like I had in my things, and so I want to give this to you. But then that also is to have Tabitha tell Julie, it's like, well, yeah, and then you should also just come back to our house because you should be with your family. And Julie's like, really? Like I should be with my family? Because Julie goes on, and we have both Tabitha and Jim who are crying, uh, and they're not sleeping, and we start to really figure out why. That I guess both of them are dealing with the loss of a family member named Thomas. Whoever Thomas is, not quite sure yet. I'm assuming it's a older son of theirs. We'll figure that out. So Julie is to go on and tell Tabitha that she knew that this family was to go on to this vacation and have this last hurrah, and then both the mother and father were going to break it to the kids that the parents were going to get divorced. So really, I'm assuming now Tabitha and Jim are at this place with one another where they're technically arguing, and like Tabitha wants like Jim here to really do something, and Jim's like, what do I do? Like there's nothing I can do. And so we have one point where Jim is just taking Ethan to the diner to get pancakes, and after Julie runs off away from Tabitha, and Fatima is to take the sweater and is to go and say, I'll give this to her. Like, it'll be fine. So, and like, we're going to take care of her. It's okay. So, pancakes. Ethan, Jim, pancakes, diner. Jim goes to the bathroom and is teary-eyed and crying because maybe he's going to soon lose his freaking mind like everyone else is going to be in this town. Yeah. Victor, all of a sudden, while Jim is in the bathroom, Victor goes on and is to show Ethan this picture of the boy in white to confirm that this is what the kid looks like. Because Ethan and Victor were talking as Victor was trying to go on and figure out if the trees have moved in this town. And so Ethan was talking about this boy that he had seen in the forest, and so Victor was trying to figure that out. Because Victor was to have seen this kid in his past. Because Victor was to go into this bomb shelter. And Victor was to come out of this bomb shelter and have everyone else in this town shredded up and killed. And Victor was to go on and spot this boy in white. And the boy in white was just like, hey, come on over to this to this merry-go-round thing. Like, come on over to this little, like, play device thing. We can just spin and just have fun. The kid didn't say anything, but he just, like, visually just said, like, hey, come on down. You're going to be the next contestant on Be on this thing and just have fun. Because you're all going to die eventually, probably, right? So Victor has seen some things, and that's why he's probably as crazed as he is. So Victor goes on and is trying to talk to Ethan about what he had seen, and Jim is like, hey, you get away from my son. And Victor's like, well, I didn't do anything. And Jim's like, that doesn't matter, get away from my son. So we have Jim at some point going and talking to Boyd, because while Jim and Tabitha were fighting, Victor was trying to get Ethan out of the house because he wanted them both to go on an adventure, because Jim wanted to show Ethan this tree that has this hole in it, where Jim is to drop this rock with a smiley face, and they don't hear the sound of it dropping. Then all of a sudden it drops right out of the sky, and they're like, whoa, like, why does it do that? And Jim's like, I don't know, like, sometimes it always doesn't, like, come back the exact same way. Sometimes it's like, it's random, it's not always the same thing. So if somebody was to go on and try to drop out of this tree, they might go on and, like, find themselves, like, right in the middle of some mountain somewhere, and they would be killed. Like, it's kind of like Nightcrawler, where the Marvel character from X-Men, Nightcrawler. If Nightcrawler was to not see where he was going, he could, like, teleport into a mountain and die. Like, it's the same principle here. So Victor and Ethan are making their way back because Ethan is starting to hear dogs, and all of a sudden we have these dogs start to arrive, and Jim and Tabitha are looking for Ethan in this forest, and all of a sudden these dogs arrive. Victor is to have a gun in this lunchbox, and he fires the gun in the air to scare these dogs away. Nobody ever is to mention anything about the dogs. So Ethan's parents take Ethan, they take him back into town to where Jim is to talk to Boyd about Victor. And Boyd is saying, like, well, normally I don't deal with the community people. Normally that's Donna's job. And Jim is like, well, he had a gun. So Boyd is like, oh, okay, like, I'll talk to him. We'll see if he does that. But also Boyd is telling Jim, it's like, you know what, like, really, like, you don't know me that much, I don't know you that much, like, how about we go on and meet one another? How about we have a dinner together? And Jim is like, oh, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Like, hey, let's go on and, like, have dinner together. Like, because it feels like eventually these people are going to need to know everyone in town and start to get to know them a little bit better, because I feel like that's the whole task of there being a very small town here. So we have Boyd that is getting ready for this dinner, like putting on his Sunday best, as he was to go on and go to church and talk to Father Cautry, and having this conundrum about going and having Frank get killed here. And we had like Boyd wanting to seek out guidance from Father Cautry, thinking that Father Cautry wouldn't go on and condemn Frank to his death, to where eventually Boyd is to throw that back at Father Cautry later on, where it's like, hey, like who would think in this town that you would have wanted Frank dead? because the father was the one to convince Boyd to put Frank in this box. And so that's kind of what Boyd kind of feels about the Father Cautry, and how Boyd never really wants to go to church. Maybe there's a whole reason for that. So we also like had the moments where like Father Cautry was talking to Boyd about how Boyd was the guy who created the whole talisman thing, and then like Father Cautry had been here before and had to bury a lot more people before Boyd came to this town. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of interesting backstory here. So Boyd, as he's getting ready for his Sunday best dinner, all of a sudden he goes and looks in this mirror and screams into the mirror as loud as he can. I'm like, yeah, crazy. Give me some more of that crazy. Slap me with it. Come on. Just give me some more of that. Yeah, like let's see what's going on in the show. So when Boyd was trying to fix the box, all of a sudden Boyd was having this like problem with his hand, and it was like going wacky. He was like, "No, no, not again." I was like, "Okay, so like, what's up with Boyd's arm?" And so we find out that Boyd isn't the only one that has that problem with his arm, because I think Nathan was talking to Sarah, and Nathan was trying to convince Sarah to not go to the diner and to not go back to work. And Sarah's like, no, like everything's fine. Like, and Sarah was the supposed crazy person about talking about the little girl in the glass. And weirdly, we had Kenny's mom break this thing of glass, and Sarah is picking it up. And I'm like, what a weird, goofy, like, metaphoric thing that's going on here. Or weird, like, story thing that's going on here, where Sarah was mentioning about broken glass, and then this episode, she ends up picking it up. So Sarah goes back to work, and all of a sudden, we have her having this arm problem while everybody's at this place. And so Sarah's realizing that her arm is strangely talking to her by having her veins create these words that are called "kill the boy." Like that's what's saying on her arm, like as if it's some weird veinish tattoo that's saying "kill the boy." So Sarah all of a sudden is starting to walk, and she collapses, and I think she's having a seizure. Boyd is crazily scrambled to go and help her, and that's how episode 4 is to end. And I'm like, okay, this is some kind of fascinating. I'm intrigued. So, because it seems like the whole like dining situation was going well. We had one point where Boyd and Kenny had to kind of have this talk, and so yeah, like it seemed for the most point things were going well. It seemed. So with that said, I think I got most of this stuff out. Maybe like not exactly the dialogue stuff. Not everything was perfect. But I feel close enough. I feel good enough about like me talking about this whole episode. Let me know in the comments below if I missed anything. There was a lot of stuff that he didn't do in perfect order or place of whatever. But really, also that's what you kind of get when you do when I do these reviews. Like you don't get it in perfect sync to the episodes because I just go about it in a very random kind of way here. But Boyd. Boyd was to go and find Frank in the box, all chewed up and charred up. So Boyd goes and takes this this wheel well and or this kind of barrel. Boyd takes this kind of like wagon There we go. That's the word I was trying to get. Boyd was getting this wagon, chucking Frank into this wagon, and putting a bunch of just sheets and whatever over, like this tarp over Frank, and then just handing off uh, Frank to the father, the priest. And while Boyd was like covered in blood with his shirt, all of a sudden both Ethan and Jim are making their way to breakfast, and they're like, "Hey, what's going on?" And so Boyd is just like, "Oh yeah, I'm just taking a couple items to Father Cautry here. Like I think everything's gonna go like great with these items." And Ethan and Jim are like, "Oh well, that sounds great. Like hopefully that goes well for you." And Boyd's just like, "Sure, yeah," as he's kind of hiding the shoe of one of the character that he's dragging the dead body uh to make it to Father Cautry here. So Boyd makes it to the father and is like saying like, "Hey, go ahead and bury him next to like his family." And the father is like going to Boyd and saying like, "Well, hey, you're gonna make it to the service, right?" And Boyd's like, "No." Like, so, man. So we're just kind of seeing what is the real problem between these two characters. I want to try to eventually figure the pieces of that. Maybe we just have it where like the father here is probably thinking that he can do this, like he could probably do what Boyd is doing a lot better, or maybe like I don't know, maybe like we're gonna have the father who's just gonna like Father Cautry take control a lot more of what's going on in this town, because that's what it kind of feels like this may head. Because it feels like he's sticking his nose in uh, to a lot of people's problems. So we'll see how far he'll stick his nose into things. We'll see. I don't know. Other than that, like it's kind of interesting to kind of see. Uh, I'm kind of really enjoying how we still have new people that we still have to explain things to. Um, and how if people are like taking to this town and trying to understand what's going on and really enjoying it. So I think that's all that I want to say right now about this whole rigmarole that I'm watching. So let me know in the comments below how you feel about From. Let me know if I forgot about something, because I'm sure there's a billion things that I probably did forget about. So without a doubt, let me know. Just really, at the end of the day, you can say whatever you want about From. Whether you don't like this show, and maybe there's something where it's like, well, I like this until this part, and I was like, blah. Hopefully, no spoilers or whatever. But at the end of the day, I could probably see, yeah, I'm really attached to a show. But then again, like, however it plays out, because it's still like this show is really early. We're only 4 episodes in, and there's 3 episodes still to go into. So yeah. Anyways, bye everybody. Bye everybody. One thing that I forgot to mention: Victor. Victor at the end of episode 4 was digging a bunch of graves. Donna was going on and meeting with Victor because people are starting to get freaked out by Victor. And Victor is telling Donna that he's just preparing this time around because everyone in this town eventually is going to die. So there might be something in place with this town why Victor was the only one left alive. So maybe at some point this whole town may go crazy and everybody might be killing everyone off. That could be a possibility, not quite sure. But at the end of the day, we're going to go on and check out other episodes. But with that said, like, one quick little thing, but it's the one thing that I kind of just jogged in my memory when I was going on and finishing this up. because I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about this one piece. So, bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.